Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes. Tonight I'm joined by Sean Conley and Stephen Ray. And for the past 6 seasons, A Celtic State of Mind have been covering the games live. We started doing it in the COVID season when we were all holed up in our houses and we were looking for something to do. And we created something of a community back then. And I've got to say, in those 6 years, I have never been this deflated after the full-time whistle. This is the first time, Sean, since 1978. Actually, before I was born. So Jock Stein's final season was 77-78, and I was born during the 78-79 season under Billy McNeill. This is the first time since then, 1978, that Celtic have gone 4 games on the bounce, 4 defeats on the bounce. And I was just saying to you guys before we went live there, not only do we feel deflated, I thought at the end of the game, Wilfried Nancy looked absolutely defeated as well, Sean. He looks like a dead man walking, going up that tunnel.
Yeah, the word that came into my head watching this at the end was abominable. And the Celtic team and squad and club, in fact, is an abomination at the moment, and it's not good viewing. As you mentioned, we're used to witnessing history as Celtic fans, quadruple trebles and things like that. And obviously we're witnessing a new kind of history this week, losing 2 cup finals in 6 months. The first time we lost a cup final by more than a single goal since 1978 or 72 or something like that. And then, as you mentioned, this 4 losses in a row for the first time since the 70s as well. Again, something that I've never witnessed in my lifetime is Celtic losing 4 games in a row. Since I was born, that's never happened, and I'm almost 40. So it's the funny thing is, it's not even that surprising really that we lost tonight. Like the shock is losing 4 in a row, but like going into tonight or even any time throughout tonight, there was no shock. At halftime, we sat here and talked about how dominant we were in the first half, and we were dominant in the first half. But we also said we look vulnerable defensively. And if you remember, I specifically said we look vulnerable at second phase of set pieces. And the 2 goals we conceded were second and third phase of set pieces. So it's not like who is not doing their job at Celtic? I mean, lots of people are either not doing their job or just entirely incompetent, because that's 10 goals conceded in 4 matches. And it's not like we're playing Dortmund and like 90s Rangers here. Like it's we're playing St Mirren, Dundee United, and Hearts. And it's just simple goals, and we're just really, really poor. I know Maeda hits the post at the end there, and it would have salvaged a point, but it's papering over the cracks. We did not come out in that second half at all. Dundee United made a like for like change and just wanted it more. And yeah, like you can't win games playing a half of football. Like if you think back to when we played Hibs a couple of, well, actually, sorry, I correct myself there. Sorry, you can win games playing a half of football if you're not a tactically naive manager. So think back to Easter Road, where we're 2-0 up against Hibs at half time, and then Hibs come out and score a goal, and we just shut it down and win the game 2-1. Like Martin O'Neill just shuts it down. Same against Dundee, 1-0 up, he just shuts it down, right? So you can win games only playing a half of football, but you have to be tactically astute and to do it. After the cup final, what does Nancy say after the game? He doesn't care that we lost. He says results don't matter to him. Well, they're going to matter to him when he's back at Columbus Crew before the next season starts.
Losses do matter. Losing cup finals do matter. There's a certain mentality, Stephen. We use words like mentality and culture all the time, but I think that if you don't have that winning mentality and you come to Celtic and you've maybe got some great philosophies about football, and I'm not writing that off, and forward-thinking philosophies, but results are the be-all and end-all, and once you get them, and Martin O'Neill has spoken about this, once you get them, you can then put your mark on it. You can put your flair on it and your style and your philosophy. But to take a team that, by the way, I think were pretty low in confidence when Martin O'Neill took over. We'd been beaten twice in a row from Hearts and Dundee. And there was a lot of things going in the background between Brendan Rodgers and the club, clearly, because, I mean, that statement that came out on the Monday night that he left the football club proved there was a lot going on. And it was almost as if Martin O'Neill lifted the whole place, lifted us as a fan base, Stephen. And then a few weeks later, we're sitting here, and this really is grim. I mean, I don't know what you think about what happens next. I didn't even want to ask the question today on the 12:30 bulletin in relation to what happens if we get beat tonight. I don't want to ask the question, Stephen. I'm a positive kind of person. And at half time, I was watching that first half, thought to myself, yeah, we said, look, we were a wee bit concerned that we weren't more than a goal up, and that came home to roost. That came home to bite us. But that team in the second half, the fall off was frightening. I mean, St Mirren was bad enough. What happens next, though, Stephen? You're a balanced commentator on Celtic. There's no kind of knee-jerk reaction, etc. But this is pretty bad. I mean, it doesn't get... This doesn't happen at Celtic. This has happened, 47 years ago this happened. And now it's just happened again. And I don't want to... I mean, I'm thinking throughout my life, if I ever said sack him... I remember in the COVID season, it got to the point where I think we needed to change the manager, and I said that on here. But I'm not the type of guy that if things aren't going well in a Ronnie Dyler season, I'm saying sack the gaffer and all this. I lived like yourself through Lou McCarry and Liam Brady and really, really bad Celtic teams. But this last 4 games has been painful to watch. What do we do, though, Stephen? That's the question.
I, like you. You say you were born 78. I'm 78 as well. I was trying to remember. They keep bringing up the last time Celtic lost sort of 3 games in a row, but you're throwing Sparta Prague and Milan in there during the COVID season. This feels like, you'll remember this. You remember we lost 4-2 to Rangers at New Year, when the board were getting attacked basically at half time. We were 3-0 down after 20 minutes. We actually lost the next 2 weeks. We actually lost to Motherwell in the league, and then we get knocked out the Scottish Cup off them. So it was like 3 defeats domestically in a row, and this is the first time I can remember 3 domestic defeats in a row, and I know it's 4 defeats overall. He looks... I kind of felt sorry for him when Maeda's shot came off the post, and then we conceded the goal, which should have been... The second goal should have been an offside that led to the corner, but the offside flag doesn't come up, and I actually turned to my son and I says, what's the odds they score here? Mm-hmm. And then obviously that happens, so... He looks like the wrong guy in the wrong movie, if we're being brutally honest. And I do feel sorry for him, but I just don't think it's going to work. You're trying to look at examples. I think you go back to Crystal Palace. I think they gave Ronald de Boer, or was it Frank de Boer? Sorry, 4 games. Just culturally didn't fit with the club. They binned him for Roy Hodgson, sort of senior old school manager. Then you're back to the start of the season. Bayer Leverkusen give Ten Hag 3 games. Culturally didn't fit with the club. Binned him. I think what doesn't look good is, and I know you'll get to this, Lawwell's effectively quit tonight in the Celtic, and Michael Nicholson's come out on video and said that he spoke to Nancy this week about recruitment. How can he go from speaking about recruitment for January to sacking him tomorrow or tonight? I think if Nancy goes, I think several people have to go. This is now the chance to clean slate the whole place.
This is my concern. This is my concern about Nicholson, because we never touched on it at half time, Stephen, but I watched that interview earlier on today, and I'm looking at Michael Nicholson and I'm thinking, no matter what happens, Nancy's here for the duration. That was it. That was the impression I was getting from Nicholson. Brian Wilson starts talking about we've been in tough times and we came back stronger. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, wait a wee second. We were a penalty shootout away from winning a treble not that long ago, right? We went toe-to-toe with Bayern Munich in February 10 months ago. How did this happen? And it's almost as if they're resigned to a number of different issues that were beyond their control, Stephen. I'm getting the impression Nicholson will do nothing about this. Celtic will do nothing about it.
Nicholson is vanilla in a suit without a tie. He's so uninspiring. You feel like he's reading off some sort of auto cue whenever he's doing an interview. I'm actually lost for words. That second half was just like, where the hell did that come from after that first half? It was almost as if United felt like they got away with it in the first half and they smelt blood. And as soon as they scored the second goal, I just couldn't see a way back. The players need to take responsibility as well. the players are just not good enough. You know, McCowan was really weak for, I think, the first goal. You know, the second goal, like Sean says, we've lost. I think we headed it maybe 2 or 3 times before the boys took it out there and pinged it into the bottom corner. I think the whole as my kids come in with the dogs, the whole place is a shambles. I think now's the time. If Desmond's got anything about him, now's the time to start pulling the trigger.
Well, this is the thing. I'm going to bring in as many comments as I can. There's a lot of people frustrated in the comment section, and I totally understand that we are as well. There's a certain element to us where we try and hold back a wee bit and not just kick off. It would be easy to kick off. Believe me, I'm as frustrated and angry at what's happened to a football club in such a short space of time as everybody that's online just now. Over 7,000 watching this. And the big question for me is what happens next. I always think that we always talk about, Sean, this moment that Dermot Desmond gets angry because Rangers directors were laughing at him and screaming and shouting and singing songs after they knocked us out of the cup under Ronnie Dyler, and he reacts by bringing in Brendan and giving him the big salary and giving him money and all this nonsense. If that doesn't anger him, what's happening at the club right now doesn't anger him, nothing will, Sean. Because, again, going back to these interviews, you might not have had a chance because, obviously, the time difference over there, Sean. But they're blaming the fans. Peter Lawwell's statement blames the fans. Nicholson and Wilson back him up. And I'm not condoning violence or aggression or threats to anybody. That's not on. But take some ownership of this. Show some reflection here. There seems to be none, Sean.
Well, we have historical evidence of, if we remember, during the COVID season, I don't know how you define it, but anyway, when the fans were demanding Lennon out and Desmond doubled down, she said, "Nah, Lennon stays as long as I want him to stay," and eventually he left. But like, he was very stubborn and certainly gave the public appearance without actually being public that he was being stubborn and pig-headed about it. And we don't know if that's going to be the case this time. It might well be. He might well double down on it. But I'd be very surprised. There's just like, when you're drawing a line through how our appointments are made and our club is structured, it's really concerning. Like, where does Paul Tisdale come from? He's mates with Gavin Strachan, right? So who's the only coach that survives this new reshuffle? Gavin Strachan. So there's jobs for the boys there. Paul Tisdale coming in from Exeter and Stevenage fame.
Don't forget Bath.
Yeah, and then where does our new coaching and management team come from? Oh yeah, they're Tisdale's mates as well from back in the day. Ampadu is friends with Tisdale, and so he comes over with Nancy, and it's basically jobs for the boys, and it's an absolute shambles. I don't know where these guys are coming from. There's just some circle of mates that are just absolutely running us into the ground, and the board are responsible because they're allowing it to happen. They're appointing them, but it's also there's just an old mates boys club here that are just not competent enough. I don't see how Nancy can possibly how anyone can possibly justify keeping him in after. I don't care if it's only 4. I mean, I do care, but it's like only 4 games. There's enough evidence to sack someone after 4 games, right? Dundee United are not a good team. That's their second win since September. September, and it's now December. The last game they won was on October, and again, it's now December. Like, they are not a good team. They do not win games until they've faced us. What I think when we lost to, it was Rangers. So like, that speaks to squad, right? That we lost to Dundee, and again was a 1. Don't think Dundee won for the next 4 games. I don't think they won for the 4 games before it. Something along those lines. So we are historically bad. Every person who's responsible for anything of note at our club are just incompetent. I can't. It needs to get emptied from almost every level. I don't think there's anyone who could justify maintaining their position in any kind of shuffle right now.
No, you're right, and even the very fact that Peter Lawwell, I've been talking about for the last 2 or 3 days, Stephen, as being the last leader we've got left. I was talking about Lawwell being the last hope of anyone stepping up and standing up to Dermot Desmond. And then he chucks in the towel. And who do we replace him with? Brian Wilson, 20 years a board member, having brought nothing to the table. he now just shuffles into the chairmanship. Now, we're in a situation now where Dundee United fans are singing, keep the board. They want us to keep the board. I want to bring in some comments. But I want to ponder this for a moment, right? Because what Sean says is right. It's the old pals act. Paul Tisdale meets Dermot Desmond at one of the Strachan's weddings. Before you know it, he's given this lofty position that in a structural chart is above the manager. He's the head of football operations. And there's nothing, absolutely zero in his CV that would say that he qualifies for that position. But he's given the role in any case. And then, as you say, Ampadu was the under-19s manager for 4 years at Exeter during the 12-year stay that Tisdale had there, knows him well. And obviously there's your link. But what I'm going to ask you, Stephen, because if that's your link and your link's brilliant and you bring in a great manager and that manager's name is Ange Postecoglou, everybody's happy, right? But when that manager comes in and he loses 4 games and he doesn't seem to have a clue as to the magnitude of this job, that's an issue. Do you think that in terms of the recruitment process, we actually interviewed anyone else for this job? Do you think we basically just said, right, we're going to be the identifiers of the talent, and the guy that does that is Paul Tisdale, the football doctor, the cat in the hat, he can find us a manager, and he went and found us a manager? Or did we go through a proper process here? And if so, who did we consider for this job? What do you think, Stephen? Did we do the due process, or did we just dive in and say, I know a guy who knows a guy?
Sorry. If they did interview anybody, it would have been out. We would have heard names.
Yeah.
So that tells me, and that's the same with the manager as well. If we'd interviewed anyone, the names would have come out. So it is what you're saying. It feels like an old boys club, and I'm sure we've all worked in places in the past where, you know, somebody's mate gets a job that's underqualified, and you know he's on more money than you and all that type of stuff, and it just breeds resentment. And yeah, it's I can't get my head around how within 2 weeks of playing Dundee 2 weeks ago tonight we played Dundee, and we're now in this position. You know, you can lose cup finals. I've seen us lose to Raith Rovers and Kilmarnock and stuff like that in the past. I've seen us lose to smaller teams in Roma, but it's just, I'm actually speechless. I can't believe, you know, I was nearly cancelling you coming on, so I couldn't believe what I was watching. Yeah, it's like I said earlier, it needs Desmond to. He's going to get criticised in Ireland. Now, as far as I'm aware, nobody really ever talks ill of him in Ireland. Now, when he starts making the news over there, and Sky Sports is criticising the club, and it becomes an embarrassment, then he's got to take action. You know, would it be more embarrassing to keep Nancy as manager? Would there be more pressure on him to keep Nancy? That's the question I want to ask. Is would the club be seen as almost sabotaging their season by keeping a guy who's clearly in the wrong picture?
All fingers would point at that being the case. That's the trait, that's the behaviour that I would expect from this football club, right? Because even if you just use this season in isolation, the way that we have handled things has been absolutely monstrous, right? So Brendan Rodgers leaves the football club. Now, by the way, I don't know if he had a job lined up. People will probably laugh in the comments and say, come on, you know that you had this job lined up and that's why he was holding off and all the rest of it. Maybe he did. But the bottom line is, the way that we handled his departure from the club was amateurish. It was tin pot. It was not befitting a Celtic Football Club, that statement that Dermot Desmond, you know, released that night, taking over the club's channel. The guy's got 34.7% of the shareholding, and I'm so glad more and more people are pointing that out. Less and less folk are calling him the owner of the club. That used to just be the default title that he was given. Less people are calling him the majority shareholder, because he's not. And once it gets to the mainstream, like you say, Stephen, that's embarrassing for him. And that is where you push the buttons of an egomaniac, megalomaniac, narcissist, all these different titles that he may or may not fall under. But you start pushing the buttons when you actually start to mock their ability, their professionalism to do the job. And when I look at their track record, I do not believe for a moment, and I hope I'm proved wrong, by the way, because I'm at the end of my tether with this, I don't think they'll pull the trigger on this. I don't think, after watching the interviews today, when Michael Nicholson's talking about that meeting that Stephen references, or we're talking about January, the plans. The last time a manager spoke about January, he was resigned that night. He went in to speak about January transfers, and he found out that night that he had resigned from his position. Sean, I just think that the character traits we've seen with the people in charge and those with authority at the football club, I don't see them making a decision on Nancy. I think they're going to stick with this guy. They're going to give him the January window. And that is going to be damaging. I mean, we're still reeling from the first transfer window under Brendan. We've still got £10 million of players in Odenholm, Nawrocki and Palmer to come back. Mm-hmm. Guys that, were more or less thrown in the scrap heap, put out on loan. Hopefully the guys will buy them after a successful loan. £10 million worth of players. I mean, we keep going on about this money in the bank, Sean. That'll not be there in a couple of seasons at this rate.
No, it certainly won't be. And we're going to be heading towards getting tarpaulin on the top flight of the stadium again.
Yep.
So far, it's we've had one out, and as you mentioned earlier, it may not even be the one that matters the most. It's probably the one that matters the least in terms of Lawwell being the one that resigns. The ones that we really need out, or we need Desmond to not be making football decisions, and we need Nicholson to just go somewhere else. And he's just not competent, or has not provided any evidence of competence to date. So I don't like to be reactionary. Like most games when we come on here, I'm relatively analytical and stoic about it when we lose. So I don't think I'm not at the position of Nancy should be getting walked across the pitch like Jim Goodwin did when he got sacked at Aberdeen. I'm not quite that level of Nancy must go, but I think tomorrow he should be coming in for a meeting, and that should be to discuss the terms of his departure. But anytime that most of the managerial appointments we get right have just been luck, right? I mean, obviously not Rodgers. Rodgers was so proven, right? Like he nearly won the EPL with Liverpool. He was at Chelsea. He had a massive pedigree. There was anyone could see that he was a good manager. But then even just the Postecoglou one was luck, right? It came out that Desmond tried to argue against the appointment when Lawwell brought it up. Right, Lawwell had to fight to get Postecoglou appointed against Desmond's, because presumably Desmond wanted to go find the next Irish boy or whatever. Because when Martin O'Neill did well over the last few games, that was how long did they take to make that appointment? 5 minutes, right? Mm-hmm. And then it took them 5 weeks to get Nancy in, and that's proven to be a disaster and an absolute 5 weeks wasted. And it just makes me despair. I think Stephen said twice that Nancy's in the wrong movie. I mean, I think what is the right movie at this point for him? Is it the Amityville Horror or something like that? Is it Saw? I don't know, man. He's definitely in the wrong film, but what is the right one? I don't see what they saw that made them think he was was it because he won Coach of the Year last year in MLS? Is that it?
I think it comes down to Paul Tisdale. It comes down to Paul Tisdale for me, Sean. It comes down to a guy who is so far out of his depth. And listen, I know you can look at a CV, give it a cursory glance and make a judgment on it. If he had made something up like a Jamestown analytics system and he was some kind of data genius and he was bringing something to the table, I get that, but he's not. He's absolutely not. And I know he's got his own data system. How many people have got a license for it? How many other clubs tap into Paul Tisdale's expertise? I bet you nobody does, because he's a guy who was managing Stevenage and Bath and Exeter. I mean, come on, it's getting embarrassing, right? So I think that's what it comes down to. And Paul Tisdale will believe in his own mind, wearing his little cravat and his daft hat, he'll be believing that he's the most intelligent person in the stadium. He'll be thinking, you didn't have a clue about football. This is how football works now in the modern day. It doesn't. It absolutely doesn't, right? And I know that when Martin O'Neill was in charge, he was a figurehead. I know that the training was taken by his coaching team. But by the way, that's the way he operated when he was here first time round. You talk to Chris Sutton, John Hartson, Tomo, any of the guys that played in the Seville team. And that's how Martin O'Neill always operated. And I think that probably came from the old school Brian Clough approach. And Martin O'Neill kept it going, but he was a figurehead. And he's a leader. We have no leadership whatsoever, and we've even got less leaders now that Peter Lawwell has left the building. There was something said today, Stephen. It was Brian Wilson, who is now the interim chairman until we get a permanent appointment, and he said that we can still go and win the league, and we can still go and win the Scottish Cup. I just felt like I was sitting having a
and we can still do well in Europe.
We can still do well in Europe. I was just thinking, oh man, this guy, he's 77. He shouldn't be in this position. I felt sorry for him. He's so far removed from the reality of the situation. We are in a tailspin. We're funneling out of control. We have no leaders. The team looks absolutely confused, totally confused, dysfunctional. Good players are looking less than good. You've got Shin Yamada there, by the way, and I said at half-time, it'd be good to see him when we're 2-0 up. I take it back. Take it back. I mean, he's a player that I'm sorry, he's just not at a level. And Johnny Kenny in front of him's not at our level. But somehow, Martin O'Neill managed to get a tune out of this squad. I'm going to bring in some of these comments, right? We've got over 13,000 watching just now, guys. Over 13,000, right? So Ewan Martin comes in to say, thanks for supporting the channel, Ewan. We either fire Nancy now and try to win this league or give the league to Sefco. Now, what I will say is this, even if it's not a knee-jerk reaction, Stephen, what I will say is I believe if we keep Nancy, we don't win the league. That's the way I'm going to say it. Rather than sack him, get rid of him, get him to wherever, I'm going to say if Nancy's in charge, we don't win the league this season. What do you reckon, Stephen?
No, I don't think we do. I was trying to look at how many teams, and the thing is with the transfer window, if we bring in players to try and suit his system and nothing works, and we end up emptying them in March, we've now got to try and find a manager who plays that system. You know, there is quite a few teams who play it in Europe, but it's more of the sort of top level. I think the team that probably played it best over the last few years was Leverkusen when they won the league. You know, but they had top players, you know, that can control a ball, pass a ball, shoot, score, move, you know, technically gifted.
Defend a set piece.
You know, they gave up. So I was actually reading a piece on them the other day on that season. But it took Alonso, he took over when they were 17th and they finished 6th. But they did have quite a lot of defeats in that season. It took them about 10 months to really build a team that would then go on and win the league. But Celtic's not that club. And the team across the road from us, they're not that. We're no development clubs, and I don't want to put us in the bracket with them, but let's be realistic. I think Celtic and our neighbours are manager clubs. They need almost like a head of state, you know, with coaches underneath. I know Celtic definitely do, and that's when we've done our best. You know, I know Strachan was on the training ground, but he was a figurehead for the club at the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Lennon, you could say, grew into that kind of position, and obviously it fell apart in the end. And Ange as well, you know, just a cult of personality, if you want to call it. I think we all love the idea of a progressive coach, plays this fancy system and, you know, passing and moving and, you know, and all these sort of, you know, triangles and patterns of play. But I just don't think it works with a club like us. We're a club that you need to win. Mm-hmm. Just win. And if we can play well, under Strachan for 3-4 years, I thought the football was boring at times, but we won, and we look back on it because we made Champions League last 16. We won the league 3 out of 4, and should have won it 4 out of 4 if it wasn't for Lawwell and his Moneyball operation. So, yeah, we don't win the league with Nancy in charge. I think that's absolutely evident. I don't know when we get our first win under Nancy if he stays in charge. I don't think the players are good enough, no matter who comes in long term. But if you're going to pull the plug, it needs to be now. It's now or never, because we can't afford. That's one game in hand gone.
Yeah,
I think Rangers might take something for Hearts at the weekend, so you've still got a chance to, you know, draw them back. But we can't afford another 2 or 3 defeats.
We can't.
And Rangers are coming up on the 3rd.
Exactly.
And they're now starting to keep clean sheets domestically. You know, it's big trouble if we don't pull a plug. And I hate saying it because I didn't want to come on tonight and feel like that. But you've got to say what you see.
That's the only way, Stephen. And I think you'll be accused, regardless of knee-jerk reactions, if you're talking about sacking a manager after 4 games. People from the outside looking in will think it's knee-jerk. But when you've watched every single credible, we spoke about it midweek last week.
But it can't be knee-jerk. Any Celtic manager who loses 4 in a row will lose their job. Steen lost his job that season.
There you go. If Jock Steen can lose his job, anyone can. Anyone. And Nancy, for me, again, not a body language expert. I don't think you have to be. I watched him, even when Dundee United scored, he started clapping. I don't get that. I don't know if it was nerves. Sean. He started clapping both times. And I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking back to Ageti missing a chance against Ross County when they beat us 2-0, when there was no fans in the ground, and he smiled, and it just annoyed me because I'm thinking, you don't get this. You cannot possibly smile or applaud another team's goal. Come on. And at the end of the game, I was just looking at him, and his head was down. Like, literally, his head was down. He's looking at the turf. He's walking up towards the Celtic fans. And by the way, the Celtic fans had a banner, Celtic's shame, pointing at the Celtic board members who were just to their left as you look at them. And again, I just think they're going to dig their heels in, unfortunately. The fans are to blame for everything. Brendan Rodgers is to blame for the state of the squads, even though, as I say, got us to a whisker of winning a treble, and we were, looking back on the Bayern Munich game earlier on today. We've got Brandon Warren, players absolutely abhorrent, but Nancy will be blamed. We can't let the players off the hook. I mean, the performances have been dreadful, Sean. And in the first half, you think to yourself, we're in control. We should be 2 or 3-0 up. The handbrake went on. I mean, is it a fitness issue? I know that a lot of people are concerned at the amount of times a player's come back from a hamstring injury and almost immediately got another one. Is there an issue with us? We had no energy in that second half.
I don't think it's a fitness issue, because once you get to December and you're playing 90 minutes every 3 days, then it's kind of like the old Lee Griffiths thing, right? He would never train, but when you had a game every 3 days, he was fit. After, so like you kind of just get fitness from playing games. So I don't think it's that. Maybe we could be better. Maybe players have seen their mates going down with hamstrings and they're subconsciously, like putting the handbrake on a little bit. But I think there's more to it, right? We've got, obviously, I think everything needs to be set on fire, burned to the ground, and build it again, like from top to bottom. I really do. But within that squad, there's Liam Scales, since Nancy's came in, has looked like the Liam Scales before he went to Aberdeen. And that's the same Liam Scales that has won man of the match in the Champions League twice.
Yeah.
Who's picking up assists and scoring goals for his national team. And now he looks like he wouldn't get a game at Aberdeen anymore. So there's more to it than just that's not fitness, right? Especially centre back, there's a lot more going on there. Yeah, man. Like, it's
Nygren has gone from being Mark O'Neill's 4th favourite Swede to not even starting a game. And you're looking at, in terms of the drop down in performance of several players who, I mean, I'm not saying you could have counted on Nygren, but for parts of the season, I'm looking at him going, he's not been a bad signing. When you look at his goals and assists, he was doing really well. His contributions were excellent. But there's only so many players that can pull you across the line if so many others are dragging you back, because they just become a weight around your ankle. And I'm looking at Callum McGregor and I'm thinking to myself, there's only so much this guy can do here. He can't drag us out week after week. I was thinking back to the goal he scores and he goes mental and it's near the end of the game. And you're thinking, I didn't even believe we had that in us today. There's a real lack of belief, Sean. And if we're seeing it and it's filtering into the team as well, Kay Mullen, no goal scorer up top, no structure at the back. Who would have known if you were to sell Kyogo and Ida and you bring in Shin Yamada, you recall Johnny Kenny from loan, and you bring in Iheanacho outside of the window, that we would have no striker? Who would have known? I mean, maybe that comes down to really, really poor squad management. The abuse on Nancy is shocking, says Ronan Gray. No confidence now. He didn't look as though he had any confidence whatsoever, Stephen. I mean, see, when you're at the football, I've never, like, it's just a personal thing, I've never booed a player. I've never booed a Celtic player. I booed Maurice Johnston. I've never booed a Celtic player, and I never will. And when I heard that, I did think to myself, we're going to discuss this after the game. What do you think about Nancy get to Falkirk? I mean, what do you think of that.
I don't like it. We heard that a few months ago with Russell Martin getting it, even when I think they scored a winner against Livingston in the last minute. I think the first chant out of the stands was Martin get to Falkirk, which was just in the road for Livingston, to be honest. So I don't like that. I know it's the performances have been poor, the results have been terrible, and it doesn't look good, and it looks like a dead man walking. But I don't agree with that, and I'm the same as you. And that's not to put me in a pedestal of some sort of, I'm this super fan that. I mean, I don't even go anymore, to be honest. I've not been pretty much back since Lawwell appointed Lennon in the showers. So, I don't like it. There is ways to go about it. Nancy didn't ask for the job. He was approached, and he's going to take it, all day long. I'm starting to think we signed the Managerial Motley crew rather than the Columbus crew. So it's so bad. It just feels like, and he's talking in riddles. Just the more he speaks, the more he's digging a hole and stuff. So
beyond winning, that was the one from the press conference yesterday.
I think I got what he was meaning, and I know English isn't his first, but he's been in the States and Canada for 20 odd years or whatever. So I think what he means is win, but win with great performances. I think that's what he was trying to say, but he just wasn't getting it out, and it just sounded like a big rabble, which confused everybody, including the press. So, I was just thinking when I muted myself for a minute there, I'm just thinking Celtic are playing Aberdeen on Sunday. What's that going to be like if Nancy's still in charge? They might need to dig out the banners for the top tier. If he's still in charge.
They need to keep Santa well away from Celtic Park. Santa should not be going anywhere near Celtic Park.
No, you'll get hit with a shark.
Yeah, the team are going to get booed onto the pitch on Sunday.
This is another interesting thing, guys, right? And you've not seen it yet, Sean, because of your time zone. But Michael Nicholson talks about 3 members of staff being assaulted after the game on Sunday. Now, we'd heard the rumours that Tisdale had been attacked, and I heard he'd been grabbed by the throat.
Well, there's no place for that.
No, and I didn't want to put it out there because people just think you're a rabble rouser and all that, and I wasn't there, so it's absolute hindsight. No hindsight, sorry, it's hearsay. But Michael Nicholson confirmed it. 3 members of staff, right? So to go back to what Stephen says, what's it going to be like? Well, there's a level of anger here, Stephen. There's a level of anger that if that's what happened after the League Cup final, I'm concerned. I'm concerned at how this is going unless the club do something to address it. And I'm not saying, look, mob rules. I'm not saying that, you're going to do it out of fear. But if we're talking about taking responsibility for Celtic's failures this season, I'm not buying that everything that went wrong was Brendan Rodgers' fault. I mean, obviously, he takes some share of the blame. But at what point is the CEO taking any share of Kyra and not being prepared and not replacing Kuhn in time and not replacing Kyogo in time and not replacing Joe Hart in time? I mean, that's the one that goes under the radar a wee bit. Joe Hart announced about 8 months before he retired that he was going to retire, and we needed the Rodgers Rolodex to bring in Kasper Schmeichel. We were not prepared for the eventuality of Joe Hart retiring. We have been, for me, I almost swore there, guys, and I've never sworn in 8 years. I almost swore. I'm going to have a wee think about that one. We have never shown a responsibility as a football club to take these failures and say, right, who is going to actually be the fall guy here? Because there's only so often you can say, right, it's Brendan Rodgers, he's out the door. It's the fans, it's the ultras will ban them, it's fan media will ban them. You can't continue to do that. At some point, you're going to have to turn around and say, we made a mistake by not being prepared for Kyra. We made a mistake by not replacing the players I've already mentioned. We've also made a mistake by our reaction to removing the gaffer, and we've made a mistake by appointing Nancy, Sean. So whose head has to roll? It's the CEO for me. It's Paul Tisdale for me. Dermot Desmond's going nowhere. He's going nowhere until somebody can manage somehow to bring up 34.8% of the shares and go toe-to-toe. He's going nowhere, so there's no point in thinking about that right now. But short term, the decision makers are getting away with murder here, Sean. No one is taking responsibility for it.
Yeah, and yeah, I know. This is why, just to be clear, if that's true about anyone being physically manhandled or assaulted in any way, whoever did that they can go support someone else. There's just no place for that. Doesn't matter how bad a job someone's doing. react with physical violence to them. That's just not okay. No one, I don't think anyone condones that. And if anyone sees it, call it out, and they can spend some time at Her Majesty's convenience or move on to support a different club somewhere else in Glasgow. But yeah, no, it's frustrating, and that's fans will voice their frustration of any club, right? And obviously we are historically bad right now, and there's just in every level you look at, there's just something wrong. Like you can even look at like the catering and be like, oh man, 0-hour contracts, those are exploitative, that's bad working conditions. We can look at I went on the club tour when I was last there, and it was a shadow of what it's been in the past. Our B team is at the worst level it's been since it went into the, objectively speaking, the worst level it's been since it went into the Lowland League. The scouting, they scouted 129 right backs and made that public information and couldn't identify one that was suitable. What were they? I mean, what? How many even right backs are there in the UK or wherever? Right, like was there two per team? How many teams is that then? Like, yeah,
that's a good point. How many right backs actually are there here in Europe? Did we look at them all?
Like maybe there's a few hundred, right? Like, and you can't find one that's suitable. I don't know, man. Like, there's just so much so wrong at so many levels, and we've been getting away with it for years because we have so much stronger resources and a lot of luck as well. And you can look back; it goes back 30 years, maybe the bad transfer decisions. We signed Raphael after watching some videotapes, spent 4 million on him at a time when 4 million was about 8 million in today's money. I think you referenced the one earlier, Stephen, where we tried to sign Stephen Fletcher and instead opted for Willow Flood. That was a Peter Lawwell signing. Thanks, Peter. Tried to get John McGinn, but we were pissed him off so much that he went off to Aston Villa instead. So we signed Yusuf Malumbu. Like this is stretched out over a long time. This is not an acute issue. Like when we have been successful, it's because we have more resources and frankly luck. There's nothing infrastructurally sound about this club that I can see anyway, to be honest.
There's a brilliant thread on X. I know it's not everybody's favourite social media platform. And Roger Mitchell, who's not everybody's favourite person, obviously quite blunt, quite bold. Go and have a look at his post on Peter Lawwell on X. I think there's a couple of points he might disagree with, but he's pretty much on point. Vandal Grease comes in, apathy before this, pure anger now. I'm feeling the anger. I'll tell you, I've never been so angry supporting Celtic. Vandal Grease, put it all in the one message, mate. You'll save yourself a few quid. And I'm in my 40s. Sean, are you in your 40s yet?
Not yet, almost.
I was just saying, we're kind of from the same era. AG times AG, surely the board just pay off Nancy and say it isn't working and look for another manager. He needs to take 8 or 9 players with him. This is the thing. I do go back to it. And again, it's not someone who he's no universally liked, but I do listen to Gary Neville's show, The Overlap. And he spoke about the effect of one bad transfer window. He says it can take 5 transfer windows to resolve one bad window. And this is my concern, Stephen, going into January. If we go out there and buy half a dozen players to suit Nancy, it doesn't work out in Nancy. Because let's be honest, if he doesn't win the league, he's gone. That's what happens if you're a Celtic manager, right? And then we're left with a half dozen players. And it takes you 5 windows to resolve that bad window. I don't think we can allow this to happen in January.
Signing bad players is probably just as bad as not being decisive in signing the right player. So we mentioned Stephen Fletcher back in the day. I think we were 7 points ahead of Rangers. We had the chance to sign Fletcher for 3 million quid. We didn't do it. We lose the league. So there's consequences that snowball. We lose the league in the last day because we drew 2-0 to Hearts and Hibs in the last two games.
Yeah.
Which means we don't go into the Champions League straight in. I think Rangers went straight in. We end up meeting Arsenal, who pump us out, and then we don't see Champions League football. We lose the next 3 weeks, and we don't see Champions League football until 2012. So one decision to not sign Stephen Fletcher had a 3-year consequence for Celtic back then. And then you look at John McGinn. We don't sign John McGinn when it's an absolute tap in a signing. Now, I think Rodgers was slightly to blame for that one because he told John McGinn he would get game time, whereas Steve Bruce told him he would play all the time. And John McGinn's spoken about this on BBC. But we end up losing to AEK Athens because we've not signed McGinn and we didn't sell Boyata when we should have. And the whole thing's I've nearly swore myself, an S show, as we could call it. So I think not. And then you look at this window. So if Saudi was on the cards for Rodgers, he should have been gone in the summer. I think they've known that he was going to be going. If he wasn't going to sign a new contract, I think they've held back, believing that the squad was good enough because they get a draw over the Allianz and should have beat Bayern on the night. I think they believed that the squad was good enough to get past Kairat. We'll maybe make a couple of decent signings, and we're in the Champions League. We bank that money, and Rodgers will see out the season, and everybody's happy. I genuinely believe they held back. I don't think they're not signing Dolberg. I'm not sure that was 100% on them. I think we pulled back on that as well. So we went from nearly signing a £10 million striker to signing somebody for free who's injury prone. I think we've got an indecisive, arrogant, only see 5 feet in front of them board, and they can only blame everyone else for so long. And now I've got visions tonight getting back to Celtic Park of the Spider-Man meme where they're all pointing at each other.
Yeah.
Because now they're all going to start turning on themselves. Because it can't be all the fans. It can't always be the players. And it can't be Nancy. If Nancy's not good enough, then that's on them. They've not done their homework. And the evidence is out there. How many managers, I know he's French, but how many American-based managers work in Europe? Very few, if any. And the one that probably you could say was a bit of a success was at Salzburg, Jesse Marsh. But Salzburg have historically always had a great setup. So was it the setup or was it the manager? I just, like I said earlier, I think Celtic's a manager's club. And I think the whole board need emptied tonight along with the manager, and we need to start fresh. We've still got time. The crazy thing is, as terrible as it's been, and we've lost 4 in a row, we've still got a chance in Europe, and we've still got a chance at the league. Because I think all the teams at the top will all take points off each other. Nobody's going to run away with us.
Only on paper, though, Stephen. Only on paper.
Only on paper.
You're spot on, Stephen, right? And this is the thing, going back to that season that we mentioned before, where Neil Lennon eventually does leave the club, and we're going for 10 in a row. I call it the COVID season. I don't know if officially that's what it's known as, but we were all sitting at home, started covering the games, and we called for the removal of the manager in October. By the way, plenty of people were saying it earlier than that. It just wasn't working. You could tell the players weren't buying into it. There was loads of other things happening, of course. It didn't happen until February, by which time the season was gone. We lost everything. We that was the season after a quadruple treble, for goodness sake. We lost everything. Didn't win a single trophy. So as I'm sitting here, I'm actually looking at it going, right, January transfer is the window is massive. Stability is massive. We're not going to get that with Nancy, I'm afraid. If you want to win this league, I think you're going to have to twist. Doko,
who's going to want to sign for him?
Exactly.
He's McCarthy.
He's going to sell a vision, but people see the results. They're going to think, mate, you're not going to make it to the end of January.
I know. Why are you signing for a manager that you're not going to play under beyond 4 or 5 months? Brendan was right about those 2 players, you think? I don't think Brendan was blameless when it comes to that.
I'll jump in. I'm kind of side-eyeing the post-match here, and that the chance that falls to Shin, it looks like a clearance, his shot at goal. It looks like he's cleared the ball. Like it literally looks like a defender's clearance. He
had two great chances. The one that was a kind of half scissor kick that went miles over, and that one I think you're talking about, where he could have taken the touch, as Sutton says, and just slotted it away. You're right. It looks like a clearance. It was dreadful, emphatically bad. Martin O'Neill got results, but his performances were just as poor. Should have lost to St Mirren, struggled against 10 men, Huns, Hibs and Dundee games. Yeah, they do. You're right, they were, but we won. And this is the thing, you find a way. When you're a leader, when you've got a winning mentality, you find a way to win the game. And Dylan Patrick Pearce says, is the system too demanding on our players? I think it's too confusing. I think that's the problem. And we're playing too many guys out of their strong positions. Now, I'm going to say something here that I've never said before, ever on Acsom, and that is that we've actually got over 21,000 people watching the stream live, which is astonishing. It's just, that shows you, I think, the level of frustration, anger, bemusement, disillusionment, and everything else that we're feeling at the moment. I'm not going to keep you guys any longer because...
Can I just say one thing on the last comment there about the system? I will just say you don't defend set pieces in a 3-4-3 formation.
No, you're right. I know.
At least half the goals we've conceded in the last week and a half have been set pieces.
If you look at all the goals across the 4 games, Sean, I think you could point to that as being one of the main areas. And if you don't learn quickly enough, you won't last. This is another thing people were saying. Oh, he's been set up by the mainstream media, and he's given an answer, and you're quoting half the answer and all the rest of it. He needs to learn. That's part of the job. You need to learn not to give them too much that they can hit you with. Give them a boring answer if you want, because they will come for you, and that's exactly what's going to happen. Listen, got to thank every single one of you. 21,500 watching live. Sorry to cut you off. We're 50 minutes into a 30-minute show. If you are a big fan of Acsom and you're going to need your daily therapy sessions moving forward this season, then subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up. I've got to thank the guys. Sean got out of his bed to watch the game over in Australia. Thank you, Sean. And Stephen Ray making a welcome return back to the Celtic podcasting scene. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. Join us again tomorrow at 12:30 on A Celtic State of Mind.